John Rackham. 26 December 1682. 18 November 1720. Commonly known as Calico Jack, was an English pirate captain operating in the Bahamas and in Cuba during the early 18th century. His nickname was derived from the calico clothing that he wore, while Jack is a nickname for John. Rackham was active towards the end, 1718, 1720, of the Golden Age of Piracy. He is most remembered for having two female crew members, Mary Red and his lover, Anne Bonny. Rackham deposed Charles Vane from his position as captain of the sloop Ranger, then cruised the Leeward Islands, Jamaica Channel, and Windward Passage. He accepted the King's pardon in 1719 and moved to New Providence, where he met Anne Bonny, who was married to James Bonny at the time. He returned to piracy in 1720 by stealing a British sloop, and Anne joined him. The new crew included Mary Read, who was disguised as a man at the time. After a short run, Rackham was captured by Jonathan Barnett, an English privateer, in 1720, put on trial by Sir Nicholas Laws, governor of Jamaica, and hanged in November of that year in Port Royal, Jamaica. Early life and career. Little is known of Rackham's upbringing or early life, except that he was English and born around 1682. The first record of him is as quartermaster on Charles Vane's brigantine Ranger in 1718, operating out of New Providence Island in the Bahamas, which was a notorious base for pirates known as the Pirates' Republic. Vane and his crew robbed several ships outside New York City, then encountered a large French man-of-war. The ship was at least twice as large as Vane's brigantine, and it immediately pursued them. Vane commanded a retreat from battle, claiming caution as his reason. Jack Rackham quickly spoke up and contested the decision, suggesting that they fight the man of war because it would have plenty of riches. In addition, he argued, if they captured the ship, it would place a much larger ship at their disposal. Of the approximately 91 men on the ship, only 15 supported Vane in his decision. Vane declared that the captain's decision is considered final, and despite the overwhelming support for Rackham's cry to fight, they fled the man of war. On 24 November 1718, Rackham called a vote in which the men branded Vane a coward and removed him from the captaincy, making Calico Jack the next captain. Rackham gave Vane and his 15 supporters the other ship in the fleet, along with a decent supply of ammunition and goods. Anne Bonny. While in port, Rackham began an affair with Anne Bonny, wife of sailor James Bonny, who was employed by Governor Rogers. James Bonny learned about the relationship and brought Anne to Governor Rogers, who ordered her whipped on charges of adultery. Rackham offered to buy Anne in a divorce by purchase because he liked her, but her husband sternly refused. This caused Anne to flee Nassau and run away with Rackham. The pair, with a new crew, escaped to sea together, voiding Rackham's pardon by stealing a sloop belonging to John Ham. They sailed the Caribbean for 2 months, taking over other pirate ships. Rackham would often invite the crew of ships that he attacked to join his own. Anne became pregnant and went home to Cuba to have the child. Capture, trial, and death. In September 1720, Bahamian Governor Woodes Rogers issued a proclamation declaring Rackham and his crew pirates, although it was not published until October 1720. After publication of the warrant, pirate hunter Jonathan Barnett and former pirate Jean Bonadvis started in pursuit of Rackham, who was cruising near Jamaica, capturing numerous small fishing vessels and terrorizing fishermen along the northern Jamaican coastline. Rackham and his crew had been sailing west towards Negril. On or around October 31, 1720, Rackham's sloop was laid at anchor and fired a gun which caught the attention of Jean Bonadvis' sloop. Bonadvis reported this to Bonnet, who sailed to investigate the sloop. At 10 p.m., Barnett called out to the sloop and inquired who they were. The reply was John Rackham from Cuba, and Barnett immediately ordered him to strike his colors. Someone, Barnett testified, that because of it being so dark he could not identify who, replied that they would not surrender and fired a swivel gun at Barnett's sloop. Barnett ordered a broadside, which destroyed the boom on Rackham's ship, and his crew called for quarter. Barnett had the men put ashore at Davis's Cove near Lucia, Jamaica, where Major Richard James, a militia officer, placed them under arrest. Rackham and his crew were brought to Spanish Town, Jamaica, in November 1720, where they were tried and convicted of piracy and sentenced to be hanged. Rackham was executed in Port Royal on 18 November 1720. His body then gibbeted on display on a very small islet at a main entrance to Port Royal, now known as Rackham's Cay. Fate of his crew. Anne Bonny and Mary, read both, claimed to be pregnant at their trials 10 days after Rackham's execution, and so were given a temporary stay and imprisoned at Fort Charles until the claim was proven. Red died in her cell in April 1721, most likely of fever related to childbirth. There is no historical record of Bonny's release or of her execution. George Featherstone, Master, Richard Corner, Quartermaster, John Davis, and John Howell were executed, along with Jack Rackham, in Port Royal. Patrick Carty, Thomas Earl, James Dobbin, and Noah Harwood were executed the next day in Kingston, the day after Rackham's trial. Former crew members John Old Dad, the Cooper Fenwick, alias Fennis, and Thomas Bourne, I.S. Brown, were separately tried and convicted for mutinies committed in mid-June 1720 off Hispaniola. 9 men who had been caught drinking with Rackham's crew: John Eaton, Edward Warner, Thomas Baker, Thomas Quick, John Cole, Benjamin Palmer, Walter Rouse, John Hanson, and John Howard, were tried and convicted on 24 January 1721. On 17 February, John Eaton, Thomas Quick, and Thomas Baker were executed at Gallows Point at Port Royal, and the next day John Cole, John Howard, and Benjamin Palmer were executed at Kingston. The fate of the remaining 3, Edward Warner, Walter Rouse, and John Hanson,